There will be a reception following the reading in the Elliot Lyman room up on the second floor, to which you are all invited. "17 years ago, almost to the day, I was privileged to invite Louise Glück to Harvard to inaugurate the Poetry Room's Lamont reading series. I was younger then and bold, and unlike the poet I was introducing, rather unrestrained, in that I decided to extemporize rather than read a prepared text. But then, at some fateful juncture, I was quoting Helen Wendler, and I forgot the most important clause of the quotation. And Helen was sitting right there in the fifth row of the Lamont Forum, smiling. Let it be known that Professor Wendler is absent on sabbatical this year. And I'm sure that even though the 1977 introduction was recorded on tape, it's thanks to lack of institutional memory that I was called upon to introduce Miss Gluck's Maurice Gray reading again. Well, heeding the Greek dictum, according to which committing the same sin twice is not indicative of a wise man, I will now read this introduction, however brief it may be. From Firstborn, Louise Gluck's first collection of poems, to last year's sixth, The Wild Iris, honored by the Pulitzer Prize, there has been a steady consolidation and expansion of thematic preoccupations and of craft, as there has been a considerable body of accompanying critical writing, scrutinizing, deciphering, and documenting the poet's progress. The persistent theme of loss from prenatal knowledge to childhood, to love and the loved ones, the cultivation of present-day concerns in archetypal Greek and Hebrew containers, and the tension between container and content, the perceived ever-changing, unreliable, or just indifferent anthropomorphic or bestial nature of God, and the nature of fruit-bearing or merely flowering plants and trees. And similarly, the poet's prosodic practices, convictions, or sensibilities concerning economy and ellipsis and silence, her arsenal of devices being considerable and too considerably diverse to review here. Suffice it to say that Miss Gluck's seventh book, Proofs and Theories, Essays on Poetry, just published by Echo, displays a wealth of first-rate, first-hand crystallized opinion on contemporary poetry and poetics, which either derives from her own versification or informs it. Therefore, it seems to me that these books, Proofs and Theories, constitutes an indispensable addition and key to a remarkable canon in progress, even though most of its essays precede the publication of The Wild Iris. For it is The Wild Iris, with its refinement of style and expansion and completion of the garden as theme or container of themes, that invites the proposition of a canon. Like any garden, hers has its origins in the planting of seeds, in the nursery, in this particular instance in Firstborn. And we saw varieties growing in the house on Marshland, and then in the garden proper, published by Antaeus in 1976, about which Professor Wendler wrote, and I read, I'm doing it again, quote, "Since the house on Marshland, Glück has published a memorable sequence, The Garden, prolonging her fixed glance and conclusive style into a linked series of poems. Section of the garden could stand alone, but each gains by juxtaposition. There is more growth in the Triumph of Achilles, hyacinths, elms, and still more in Ararat, the fifth book of poems. But the possibilities that Professor Wendler and others saw in the garden proper toward a longer, perhaps book-length work, the poet felt compelled to play down in her essay, Disruption, Hesitation, Silence. Let me quote from the very opening of her argument. In my generation, most of the poets I admire are interested in length. They want to write long lines, long stanzas, long poems, poems which cover an extended sequence of events. To all this, I feel an instant objection whose sources I'm not confident I know. And, to jump to the next paragraph, what I share with my friends is ambition. What I dispute is its definition. I do not think that more information always makes a richer poem. I'm attracted to ellipsis, to the unsaid, to suggestion, to eloquent, deliberate silence. A lyric rather than an epic or saga poet, Louise Glück knew well what to cultivate and what to weed out. Still, she could not ignore the paradox of an ever-growing garden. And here it is, the wild iris. Not an epic, but a thematically linked series of lyric poems that stand alone and together, each gaining enough by association and juxtaposition to contribute toward a whole, the breadth and depth of which is and is not one long poem. What it certainly is Louise Glück's most accomplished work to date and a major work of art by any standards. In a memorable poem in the house on Marshland entitled To Autumn, we read, I'm no longer young, what of it? Summer approaches and the long decaying days of autumn when I shall begin the great poems of my middle period. It is autumn, November 15. The maker of such poems is here, and she's forever young, Louise Glück.
She is not. Well, it seems as though we collaborated because I'm going to do exactly the reading that introduction predicts. I'm going to read a little bit from each book. And if I have the courage, some new poems. It's very easy to choose poems to read from Firstborn because there's only about 3 that should be read. This is one called Cottonmouth Country. Can you hear? You can't. What can I do? Higher. It's so strangely fuzzy. Is this better? Yeah? Okay. Cottonmouth Country. Fishbones walked the waves off Haviaras, and there were other signs that death wooed us by water, wooed us by land, among the pines, an uncurled cottonmouth that rolled on moss, reared in the polluted air. Birth, not death, is the hard loss. I know. I also left the skin there. The second book was published about 7 years later. And it changes, I think, definitively in style. This is a poem called For My Mother. It was better when we were together in one body. 30 years, screened through the green glass of your eye, moonlight filtered into my bones as we lay in the big bed in the dark, waiting for my father. 30 years. He closed your eyelids with 2 kisses. And then spring came and withdrew from me the absolute knowledge of the unborn, leaving the brick stoop where you stand, shading your eyes. But it is night. The moon is stationed in the beech tree, round and white, among the small tin markers of the stars. 30 years. A marsh grows up around the house. Schools of spores circulate behind the shades, drift through gauze flutterings of vegetation. When I started writing the poems for Descending Figure, I began to be interested in mosaics, collages. The impulse that used to be completely exhausted or spent in a single lyric seemed suddenly not to be exhausted or spent, so that the single sections found themselves linking up to other single sections. I'll read one of the poems of this type. It's the one called The Garden that Stratis mentioned. It's in 5 sections, each with its own title. What I think you can hear on the page that you may not be able to hear in a reading is that a conversation is going on. The voice of the second section replying to the voice of the first. They alternate. And the subject is our sojourn here, not here, but on earth. The garden, the fear of birth. One sound, then the hiss and whir of houses gliding into their places, and the wind leaps through the bodies of animals. But my body, that could not content itself with health, why should it be sprung back into the cord of sunlight? It will be the same again. This fear, this inwardness, until I am forced into a field without immunity, even to the least shrub that walks stiffly out of the dirt, trailing the twisted signature of its root, even to a tulip, a red claw. And then the losses, one after another, all supportable. The garden. The garden admires you. For your sake, it smears itself with green pigment, the ecstatic reds of the roses, so that you will come to it with your lovers. And the willows, see how it has shaped these green tents of silence. Yet there is still something you need. Your body so soft, so alive among the stone animals. Admit that it is terrible to be like them, beyond harm. The fear of love. That body lying beside me like obedient stone. Once its eyes seemed to be opening, we could have spoken. At that time it was winter already. By day the sun rose in its helmet of fire, and at night also mirrored in the moon. Its light passed over us freely, as though we had lain down in order to leave no shadows, only these two shallow dents in the snow. And the past, as always, stretched before us, still, complex, impenetrable. How long did we lie there, as arm in their cloaks of feathers, the gods walked down from the mountain we built for them? Origins. As though a voice were saying, you should be asleep by now. But there was no one, nor had the air darkened, though the moon was there, already filled in with marble, as though in a garden crowded with flowers, a voice had said, how dull they are, these golds, so sonorous, so repetitious, until you closed your eyes, lying among them all stammering flame, and yet you could not sleep. Poor body, the earth still clinging to you. The fear of burial. In the empty field, in the morning, the body waits to be claimed. The spirit sits beside it on a small rock. Nothing comes to give it form again. Think of the body's loneliness. At night, pacing the sheared field, its shadow buckled tightly around. Such a long journey. And already the remote, trembling lights of the village not pausing for it as they scan the rows. How far away they seem. The wooden doors, the bread and milk laid like weights on the table. I try, when I finish a book, to identify what habits of speech have come to seem too mechanical or familiar. They begin as discoveries. They begin as the shaping mechanisms for a body of work, but if they're not set aside, they become mannerisms, and you like to see them before your readers do. At the same time, I try to identify any syntactical arrangements or moves that I tend to avoid, and then make as my task the practice of those, so that when I finished the poems of Firstborn, I realized I almost never, by the time I finished that book, wrote in complete sentences anymore. Everything was a single sort of bullet-like phrase. So the next book began with an assignment to write poems that were single Latinate suspensions from first word to last. I wrote nothing for about 2.5 years as I tried to figure out how to do that. I realized when I finished Descending Figure that I didn't write questions and I didn't use contractions. And it was quite interesting to recognize how alien, in fact, these forms were, and to realize that they specified a human rather than a Delphic speaker. It took me a long time also to learn to do this, but The poems in The Triumph of Achilles began as an attempt to find a way to speak that language, the vernacular, I suppose it was a beginning of, which I not understood. This is a poem called Mock Orange. It's the name of a shrub that flowers. Its flowers have an intoxicating aroma as of an orange tree, but there's no fruit. Mock Orange. It is not the moon, I tell you. It is these flowers lighting the yard. I hate them. I hate them as I hate sex. The man's mouth sealing my mouth. The man's paralyzing body. And the cry that always escapes. The low, humiliating premise of union. In my mind tonight, I hear the question and pursuing answer fused in one sound that mounts and then is split into the old selves, the tired antagonisms. Do you see? We were made fools of. And the scent of mock orange drifts through the window. How can I rest? How can I be content when there is still that odor in the world? A 3-part poem called Metamorphosis. Night. The angel of death flies low over my father's bed. Only my mother sees. She and my father are alone in the room. She bends over him to touch his hand, his forehead. She is so used to mothering that now she strokes his body as she would the other children's, first gently, then inured to suffering. Nothing is any different. Even the spot on the lung was always there. Metamorphosis. My father has forgotten me in the excitement of dying. Like a child who will not eat, he takes no notice of anything. I sit at the edge of his bed while the living circle us like so many tree stumps. Once, for the smallest fraction of an instant, I thought he was alive in the present again. Then he looked at me as a blind man stares straight into the sun, since whatever it could do to him is done already. Then his flushed face turned away from the contract. From my father. I'm going to live without you, as I learned once to live without my mother. You think I don't remember that? I've spent my whole life trying to remember. Now, after so much solitude, death doesn't frighten me, not yours, not mine either. And those words, the last time, have no power over me. I know intense love always leads to mourning. For once, your body doesn't frighten me. From time to time, I run my hand over your face, lightly like a dust cloth. What can shock me now? I feel no coldness that can't be explained. Against your cheek, my hand is warm and full of tenderness. The next poem I'll read from this book, I'm reading for Frank Bedard because he claims it as a favorite. And it also is an interesting, I think, introduction to the poems of the book that followed, the Anomalous book, the book that has no line of poetry in it. It's a poem called Legend, and it was, in fact, the last poem added to this book. My father's father came to New York from Duluth. One misfortune followed another. In Hungary, a scholar, a man of property. Then failure, an immigrant rolling cigars in a cold basement. He was like Joseph in Egypt. At night he walked the city. Spray of the harbor turned to tears on his face. Tears of grief for Duluth, 40 houses, a few cows grazing the rich meadows. Though the great soul is said to be a star, a beacon, what it resembles better is a diamond. In the whole world, there is nothing hard enough to change it. Unfortunate being, have you ceased to feel the grandeur of the world that like a heavy weight shaped the soul of my grandfather? From the factory, like sad birds, his dreams flew to Duluth, grasping in their beaks, as from moist earth in which a man could see the shape of his own footprint, scattered images, loose bits of the village. And as he packed the leaves, so within his soul, this weight compressed scraps of Duluth into principles, abstractions, worthy of the challenge of bondage. In such a world, to scorn privilege, to love reason and justice, always to speak the truth, which has been the salvation of our people, since to speak the truth gives the illusion of freedom. When I began to read poems from Ararat, which I think of as really a single utterance, the individual sections, I think, make almost no sense unless the book is read as a whole. When I started to read the poems, people would come up to me after readings and they would take my hand, which I thought was unbearably presumptuous. And then they would move on to even more painful familiarities. They would say things like, I know just how you feel. I had a blonde sister too. And I wanted to say, you don't know how I feel. And then they'd say, oh, I know how you feel. My father died too. And I wanted to say, but I didn't get along with my father, and I really missed my cat. And I sometimes did say these things, and people would take offense. But the poems in this book, in fact, I think encourage those pleasantries. those bonding experiences. And it was interesting to me to see how very much I minded and how passionately I had used poems as a means of separation from my audience. The book began as an attempt to write out of a common experience. So apparently I succeeded. And the poems are almost entirely without ornament. Difficult to read as excerpts at a reading like this. When I wrote the first one, I thought this is either going to be a whole book or I'll have to throw these out because it's as a cluster of poems about a family constellation, there's not much interest in them. I'll read the one poem that I think can stand by itself, in which the family that otherwise fills these pages doesn't even appear. A poem called Celestial Music. I have a friend who still believes in heaven, not a stupid person, yet with all she knows, she literally talks to God. She thinks someone listens in heaven. On earth, she's unusually competent, brave too, able to face unpleasantness. We found a caterpillar dying in the dirt, greedy ants crawling over it. I'm always moved by weakness, by disaster, always eager to oppose vitality, but timid also, quick to shut my eyes. Whereas my friend was able to watch, to let events play out according to nature. For my sake, she intervened, brushing a few ants off the torn thing and set it down across the road. My friend says, I shut my eyes to God, that nothing else explains my aversion to reality. She says, I'm like the child who buries her head in the pillow so as not to see, the child who tells herself that light causes sadness. My friend is like the mother, patient, urging me to wake up an adult like herself, a courageous person. In my dreams, my friend reproaches me. We're walking on the same road, except it's winter now. She's telling me that when you love the world, you hear celestial music. Look up, she says. When I look up, nothing. Only clouds, snow, a white business in the trees, like brides leaping to a great height. Then I'm afraid for her. I see her caught in a net deliberately cast over the earth. In reality, we sit by the side of the road watching the sunset. From time to time, the silence pierced by a bird call. It's this moment we're both trying to explain, the fact that we're at ease with death, with solitude. My friend draws a circle in the dirt. Inside, the caterpillar doesn't move. She's always trying to make something whole, something beautiful, an image capable of life apart from her. We're very quiet. It's peaceful sitting here, not speaking. The composition fixed, the road turning suddenly dark, the air going cool, here and there the rocks shining and glittering. It's this stillness that we both love. The love of form is a love of endings. The poems of the wild iris are like the poems of Ararat in that they form, I think, a single book. But whereas the poems of Ararat are unified by a sense of the singleness of the speaker, the unchangingness of the speaker, the speakers of the wild iris are multiple. They essentially fall into three groups. A human, a single human, whose poems are called either Matins or Vespers, and this human being addresses God, or whatever you want to call it, mainly in complaint. The next category is a group of voices from the natural world. The poems have as their titles flower names. The wild iris, field flowers, daisies, the white rose. And these voices speak sometimes to the human being, encouraging, chastising, and sometimes go over the head of the human to the divine. And the last category is whatever isn't included, the divine. And I noticed as I started to work on the poems of this type that the divine sounded immensely like my mother. She's never heard me say that. But I think that when you see how God shapes up in this book, you'll know what I think of my mother. And I will read a group of these without other interruption. Matins. Unreachable Father, when we were first exiled from heaven, you made a replica, a place in one sense different from heaven, being designed to teach a lesson, otherwise the same. Beauty on either side, beauty without alternative, except we didn't know what was the lesson. Left alone, we exhausted each other. Years of darkness followed. We took turns working the garden, the first tears filling our eyes as earth misted with petals, some dark red, some flesh-colored. We never thought of you, whom we were learning to worship. We merely knew it wasn't human nature to love, only what returns love. Trillium. When I woke up, I was in a forest. The dark seemed natural, the sky through the pine trees thick with many lights. I knew nothing. I could do nothing but see. And as I watched, all the lights of heaven faded to make a single thing, a fire burning through the cool firs. Then it wasn't possible any longer to stare at heaven and not be destroyed. Are there souls that need death's presence as I require protection? I think if I speak long enough, I will answer that question. I will see whatever they see, a ladder reaching through the firs, whatever calls them to exchange their lives. Think what I understand already. I woke up ignorant in a forest. Only a moment ago, I didn't know my voice, if one were given me, would be so full of grief, my sentences like cries strung together. I didn't even know I felt grief until that word came, until I felt rain streaming from me. Field flowers. What are you saying? That you want eternal life? Are your thoughts really as compelling as all that? Certainly you don't look at us, don't listen to us. On your skin stain of sun, dust, of yellow buttercups, I'm talking to you. You staring through bars of high grass, shaking your little rattle. Oh, the soul, the soul. Is it enough only to look inward? Contempt for humanity is one thing, but why disdain the expansive field, your gaze rising over the clear heads of the wild buttercups into what? Your poor idea of heaven, absence of change. Better than earth? How would you know, who are neither here nor there, standing in our midst? The red poppy. The great thing is not having a mind. Feelings, oh, I have those. They govern me. I have a Lord in heaven called the Sun, and open for him, showing him the fire of my own heart, fire like his presence. What could such glory be if not a heart? Oh, my brothers and sisters, were you like me once, long ago, before you were human? Did you permit yourselves to open ones who would never open again? Because in truth, I am speaking now the way you do. I speak because I am shattered. Matins. Not the sun merely, but the earth itself shines, white fire leaping from the showy mountains, and the flat road shimmering in early morning. Is this for us only to induce response, or are you stirred also, helpless to control yourself in earth's presence? I am ashamed at what I thought you were, distant from us, regarding us as an experiment. It is a bitter thing to be the disposable animal, a bitter thing. Dear friend, dear trembling partner, what surprises you most in what you feel, earth's radiance or your own delight? For me, always the delight is the surprise. Vespers. In your extended absence, you permit me use of earth, anticipating some return on investment. I must report failure in my assignment, principally regarding the tomato plants. I think I should not be encouraged to grow tomatoes. Or if I am, you should withhold the heavy rains, the cold nights that come so often here, while other regions get 12 weeks of summer. All this belongs to you. On the other hand, I planted the seeds. I watched the first shoots like wings tearing the soil, and it was my heart broken by the blight, the black spot so quickly multiplying in the rose. I doubt you have a heart in our understanding of that term. You who do not discriminate between the dead and the living, who are in consequence immune to foreshadowing. You may not know how much terror we bear. The spotted leaf, the red leaves of the maple falling even in August in early darkness. I am responsible for these vines. Vespers. You thought we didn't know, but we knew once. Children know these things. Don't turn away now. We inhabited a lie to appease you. I remember sunlight of early spring, embankments netted with dark vinca. I remember lying in a field touching my brother's body. Don't turn away now. We denied memory to console you. We mimicked you, reciting the terms of our punishment. I remember some of it, not all of it. Deceit begins as forgetting. I remember small things. Flowers growing under the hawthorn tree, bells of the wild scilla. Not all, but enough to know you exist. Who else had reason to create mistrust between a brother and sister, but the one who profited, to whom we turned in solitude? Who else would so envy the bond we had then as to tell us it was not earth, but heaven we were losing? The white rose. This is the earth. Then I don't belong here. Who are you in the lighted window, shadowed now by the flickering leaves of the wayfarer tree? Can you survive where I won't last beyond the first summer? All night the slender branches of the tree shift and rustle at the bright window. Explain my life to me, you who make no sign. Though I call out to you in the night, I am not like you. I have only my body for a voice. I can't disappear into silence. And in the cold morning, over the dark surface of the earth, echoes of my voice drift, whiteness steadily absorbed into darkness, as though you were making a sign after all, to convince me you too couldn't survive here, or to show me you are not the light I called to, but the blackness behind it. Retreating light. This is the first you've heard of the other voice. You were like very young children, always waiting for a story. And I'd been through it all too many times. I was tired of telling stories. So I gave you the pencil and paper. I gave you pens made of reeds I had gathered myself afternoons in the dense meadows. I told you, write your own story. After all those years of listening, I thought you'd know what a story was. All you could do was weep. You wanted everything told to you and nothing thought through yourselves. Then I realized you couldn't think with any real boldness or passion. You hadn't had your own lives yet, your own tragedies. So I gave you lives, I gave you tragedies. because apparently tools alone weren't enough. You will never know how deeply it pleases me to see you sitting there like independent beings, to see you dreaming by the open window, holding the pencils I gave you until the summer morning disappears into writing. Creation has brought you great excitement, as I knew it would, as it does in the beginning. And I am free to do as I please now, to attend to other things in confidence. You have no need of me anymore. Vespers. Your voice is gone now, I hardly hear you. Your starry voice all shadow now, and the earth dark again with your great changes of heart. And by day the grass going brown in places under the broad shadows of the maple trees. Now everywhere I am talked to by silence, so it is clear I have no access to you. I do not exist for you. You have drawn a line through my name. In what contempt do you hold us, to believe only loss can impress your power on us, the first rains of autumn shaking the white lilies. When you go absolutely, deducting visible life from all things, but not all life, lest we turn from you. The silver lily. The nights have grown cool again, like the nights of early spring, and quiet again. Will speech disturb you? We're alone now. We have no reason for silence. Can you see over the garden? The full moon rises. I won't see the next full moon. In spring, when the moon rose, it meant time was endless. Snowdrops opened and closed. The clustered seeds of the maples fell in pale drifts. White over white, the moon rose over the birch tree. And in the crook where the tree divides, leaves of the first daffodils, in moonlight, soft, greenish silver. We have come too far together toward the end now, to fear the end. These nights, I am no longer even certain I know what the end means. And you, who've been with a man, after the first cries, doesn't joy, like fear, make no sound? The gold lily. As I perceive I am dying now, and know I will not speak again, will not survive the earth, be summoned out of it again, not a flower yet, a spine only, raw dirt catching my ribs, I call you Father and Master. All around, my companions are failing, thinking, you do not see. How can they know you see, unless you save us? In the summer twilight, are you close enough to hear your child's terror? Or are you not my Father, you who raised me? And the last poem, The White Lilies. As a man and woman make a garden between them like a bed of stars, here they linger in the summer evening, and the evening turns cold with their terror. It could all end. It is capable of devastation. all can be lost. Through scented air, the narrow columns uselessly rising, and beyond a churning sea of poppies. Hush, beloved. It doesn't matter to me how many summers I live to return. This one summer, we have entered eternity. I felt your 2 hands bury me to release its splendor. I think that's enough. Next time.